Shalom Bumiki. In my individual oral commentary today, I will focus on one global issue, which is how society can be influenced by one's moral thinking. There are so many issues arise which are caused by the influence of a negative thought, which causes many dangerous things to happen related to human rights. A thought or opinion that develops in society does have a major influence on the development of habits or traditions in that environment, and this prompted me to consider these two texts. My first text, which is the literary one, is The Lottery, a short story by Shirley Jackson, and the non-literary text is from a poster from demonstration that says, "In my land, life is not as expensive as mining." Both of these texts focus closely on how a person's life becomes something worthless, but in a very different context and background. One similarity is that both of the texts is try to help the reader to see how one's moral thinking or traditions can be something dangerous if it continues to be carried out and even causes the threat of human rights. To be specific is the life to live. In this presentation, first I will discuss the purpose of and the tone of the literary, then following with the non-literary text, and then the conclusion. To begin with, I will explore the lottery. The purpose of this short story, if we look at the purpose of literature, which is to inform, pursue, and entertain, this short story is more to entertain the reader because the story is not a true story and the author also doesn't have any persuasion intentions. But that doesn't mean that the writer of the short story doesn't have a special message behind it. The author's purpose was to get the reader to know that not all traditions we participate in are actually good traditions, and also indirectly inform the reader about how an environment can be influenced by a certain moral thought. In the lottery, the town has a tradition each year from a long time ago where one of the townspeople is chosen by a slip of paper to be put in death. Tessie is picked that day in the story, and she claims that it is unfair because there was not enough time to choose the slip of paper. In the end, she is stoned to death by the town. In the story, Tessie arriving late for the lottery is used to show foreshadowing. If Tessie was not the lottery winning, then her showing up late would not be an important to the story. Tessie arrives late, hinting to the reader that something is going to happen to her. Tessie begged for her survival, but the town's tradition was greater than its human morals. No one dares to stand up against the tradition. From this explanation, we can see that the tradition that came from one's perspective and thoughts can really influence the whole town, even the people inside, until they didn't realize that they are being trapped in such a bad tradition and no one dares to stand up against it. The lottery. The tone has a distinct shift from a peaceful, normal, everyday kind of tone to a grimly horrific tone that finishes the tale. Note how Jackson almost from the first sentence deliberately misleads us into thinking that this story is going to be something very different from what it actually is. Note also how the children, men and women, engage in normal kinds of activities. The men swap jokes, the women engage in gossip, and the children play with stones. There is nothing to indicate that the sudden change of tone that leads the devastating vinyl. Thus, in the story, the tone is not constant. It shifts toward the end of the story from a normal, peaceful tone to one that is frighteningly disturbing. The literary device used is symbolism. The example is the black box is used to show symbolism in the short story. Because the black box was described as very old, worn down, and not big enough with the increase in population. Mr. Summers recommended that a new box should be used, but people refused to get rid of the original box because it is part of the tradition that cannot be broken or replaced. The poster that used in the demonstration contains sarcasm that truly represent the content of demonstration itself. The poster that says, "On our land, life is not as expensive as mining," is a reflection of the community anxieties about their own safety, where there is one person who died because he opposed the mining that damaged the environment and eventually ended up dying himself. The habits that have been formed where when there are individuals or groups who conflict with something or interfere with the affairs, they will be immediately hunted down and killed. This really illustrates that the thought and perspective that a person has when they feel threatened or their business are disturbed and choosing to finish their opponents greatly affects the moral of the environment, especially in respecting the rights of life of others. As a result of both texts, we can see how society can be influenced by one's moral thinking in several ways, but most of them is ended with human rights violations. The real salt in Jackson's story is one's moral thinking can be influenced a group of people in a city to continue apply bad tradition that always sacrifice person's life. But in the poster, it shows how person's life become worthless just because one's moral thinking that influenced a group of people to kill a person who just trying to convey his opinion about some issues. In conclusion, we can see that both of texts allow us to learn something about the global issues of one's moral thinking influenced in the society and also affect the human rights. From the explanation, it is clear that the global issue is contrary with the Word of God, where humans created in His image with its purpose, which means that eliminating other humans' life and their rights is contrary with the truth and the Word of